Morning. So whether you're a commercial mower company or just a residential mowing your own lawn, one of the most important things that you need to remember is to maintain your equipment. This stuff is expensive, it's a machine, it needs maintenance. And one of the most important items of maintenance to do is to change your oil regularly. As long as you keep changing that oil regularly and keep good clean oil in it, it'll last you a very long time. So today I'm going to show you how to do an oil change on my bad boy Revolts. The first oil change after you get a new machine should be about 8 to 10 hours worth of use. You change the oil, and then after that I go by every 50 hours. So the oil was changed at 8 hours, I believe, because this I bought it used. So the previous owner changed it at 8 hours and then at 34 hours just because he wanted to. So I changed it at 50 hours, and then from there, that way I know when it was changed, what was put in it, and that everything was done properly. So then change it at 100 hours, 150 hours, and so forth. So today we're going to learn how to get that done. So here's everything that you should need to get this job done. You're going to need some shop towels, because no matter how hard you try, there will be some oil that gets on your hands, will be a little bit that gets on the machine. What I call the universal oil filter wrench. If you don't have a giant pair of pliers, you can also use an actual oil filter socket. Something that looks kind of like this, goes on the oil filter, and then you can put it on a ratchet. Or if you don't have either one of those, a very strong grip strength may do. I've got some wrenches for getting the caps off of the oil tube. I'll show you that here in a little bit. You need a new oil filter, your oil. Now this tube here, you'll see after a little bit I'll explain that. But this came off of just one of these jiggler pumps, jiggler siphon pump. Got one of those. But this, I just snipped a little bit off of the end of it, and you'll see why here shortly. You're going to need something to catch the oil in. This is kind of a little trick that I learned. I took a 5-gallon bucket and I cut it just with a Sawzall. It's about 3 to 3.5 inches tall. That really comes in handy. For adding the oil in, I just use a mason jar to measure it all out, and then a funnel to pour it into the engine. So I've already put this mower outside and let it run for a little bit. That way the engine gets up to operating temperature. This process goes a little faster when the oil is hot, and then it also mixes all the contaminants that are in the oil. Over time they'll settle to the bottom, and so what you want to do with it running is it warms the oil up, but it also mixes all of the contaminants up into the oil. That way when you drain it out, it all comes out instead of just sitting at the bottom and staying in there. So the oil tube to bring them all out is right here on the side of the engine. It just comes out the side, and it's got a little cap on it. So this particular mower takes a 5/8 wrench and an 11/16 wrench to get that cap off. But before you take that off, what you want to do is pull out your deck pin, drop the deck all the way down, and what that allows you to do is you take your little cut-off bucket, and since that hangs just a little bit over that shelf, you can just slide this bucket right underneath it, so that way you don't have to try to fit some big oil catch can underneath. You can just put that little bucket up on top of those pulleys, and you drop the deck down low enough to where it allows you to fit that in there. And you don't have to worry about it overflowing, because it's only 2.2 quarts of oil that's in this engine. Alright, so we got our bucket, cut off bucket underneath. Gonna put the smaller wrench on the back side just to back it up behind the cap. Then you take your bigger wrench, get it on the actual cap, loosen it up. Now what I always do, just to avoid a mess, is just pick the oil tube up, because now the end of the oil tube is above the level of the oil, so you'll be able to spin that cap off without there being any mess, without it spilling out. Take your cap, put it somewhere you're not going to lose it. Then you can just take this cap or this tube, push it down, then I'll show you here. This is a very slow process. You can see it doesn't drain all that quickly. Let me get a better shot. See, it doesn't drain real fast. So what I like to do, get that started, and then if there's another project you need to work on, go work on that for a little bit, because this will probably take 15-20 minutes to drain out. Now this is on the bad boy Revolt 48. That little cutoff bucket will slide right up on top of the deck, and you're able to use it because the end of that tube hangs out over this shelf. Now if you're doing an oil change on a 36, you'll have to do something a little different, because that tube does not go beyond that shelf. If you took that cap off and tried to use the bucket, you're going to make a mess. So where this tube comes in handy is you would take off the cap of that tube, and then you can wire this right on up underneath, and then it will fit right over that nipple. Once you take that cap off, you can take this tube and shove it all the way over the threads and then that nut to where it will actually hold itself onto that tube. Then you can just take your catch pan, set it off to the side, and have it running right down into your catch pan. Now it doesn't need an oil change yet, so I'm not going to do one on that right now. But that's where that tube comes in handy. It's the perfect size. I've cut off of that jiggler pump to fit over the cap. Well, not over the cap will be gone, but over that nipple or that fitting, whatever you want to call it. And then it just drains it right down into your catch pan, so you avoid getting a bunch of oil and stuff on the deck. Now once everything's done draining, it'll just be dripping out of the tube. So then you can just pick the tube back up, screw your cap back on. Make sure you tighten it on all the way. No need to kill it. Get it on there strong enough to where it won't leak. Now, most of the oil is out of the engine at this point, but there is still some oil in the filter back here, and the filter is mounted sideways. So as soon as you crack that seal loose, it's going to start draining out. There's no way to get around it. Things are going to get a little messy. So you take out your little bucket catch pan, set it off to the side somewhere. You're not going to trip over it. But you're going to need some oil around this gasket. So you just dip your finger into the old oil, run some around the gasket, get that prepped up, ready to go. Gonna need your shop towels, paper towels, rags, something absorbent. And what I like to do is double them up and just put them all around underneath this oil filter. Everywhere underneath, that way it catches the oil that spills out of the filter. And you want to try to do this quickly when you take this filter off. So you're going to start undoing that. Oil's going to start to flow out of it. Try to spin it off as quick as you can. Get the old one out of the way. Take the new one and screw it on to try to limit the amount of mess. And it just gets messy every time. that's why you want all your paper towels there to catch it as much as you can. Go in there. It's kind of a tight spot. So if you can get it off just with grip strength, that's going to be a quick way to do it. But if you can get an oil filter wrench on there, see right now I'm just working it just little by little, loosening it up until it's, all right, there we go. Now it's loose. So I'm going to spin it off as quick as you can and flip it up so most of the oil stays in it. Set that off to the side. Get some of the oil off with my hands. Spin the new one on. Do not cross thread it. If you cross thread it and you force it, it's going to jack up the threads. It's going to cause you problems and it's going to leak. All right. Now, see, it's making a little bit of a mess. The paper towels are there to catch most of it. All right, then you just take your towels, clean it up, get all that other oil off of there. You don't really want to leave it because it's going to attract all of the dust and clippings and everything's going to stick to it, making your mower quite dirty. And then as far as getting rid of the oil, I just keep a 5-gallon bucket around labeled used oil. I used to pour everything back into the oil jugs and then try to take those up to the store. And I realized it was a pain in the butt trying to carry and move all of those different jugs. So 5-gallon bucket that's labeled, just take it, pour it right in. Then when the bucket fills up, take it up to the auto parts store. They take it and don't charge you. So now all the oil is drained out of it. We've got our cap back on our tube. The oil filter is swapped out. All of the mess has been cleaned up. So then you take your dipstick here, pull it out, set it to the side, take a funnel and put it in the hole, because that's kind of a hard spot to just be able to pour the jar into. Now what I do to refill it and measure it is I just use a 1-quart mason jar, because by the manufacturer's recommendations, it says 2.2 quarts of oil. So I broke that down to 70 ounces. So if you look at the side of the jar, 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 24 ounces. So I fill it up to 24 ounces 2 times, dump it in there, and then come back and fill it up with just the rest of the way to make 70 ounces. So if you want to find out what kind of oil your mower takes, you can get onto the engine manufacturer's website. That's what I did. I went to Kawasaki's website, looked up my engine, and then there's a temperature range and that they have on there. It's a chart that you can see from one temperature to the other temperature that you're going to be operating in. That correlates with the oil weight that you need to get. Let's open up this jug. Spin this around to ounces. And this is just the easiest way that I've found, the most accurate way to do it. All right, so there's the first one. It's filled right up to that 24-ounce line. Then you go dump that in. 24 ounces in. Fill it up again. I always keep a paper towel handy, just to cut down on the mess. Now I'll go pour that in. All right, 48 ounces is in the mower. So to get 70 ounces, we need 22 more ounces. So what I do is write on the jar, 16 ounces at that line. That line would be 20 ounces. That's 24 ounces. So I just split the difference between 20 and 24 to bring me right up to 22 ounces for a total of 70 ounces, 2.2 quarts into the mower. Here's that, 12, 16, 20, and try to get as close as I can. If you get a little over or a little under, it's not going to make a huge difference, but I try to make it as accurate as possible because that's what it's made to run on. See, I got just a hair too much in there. So I dumped a little bit out, and we'll try it again. Just getting right between those two lines. Boom. 22 ounces. Now I'll go dump that in. All right, got that in. All of the oil's been drained. We have the proper amount of oil put back in. New filter. Now I don't just use any random mason jar that's just sitting around in the shop. This one I use specifically for oil. Whenever I'm not using it, it's got the lid on it. That way dust and metal shavings and stuff isn't getting into the container. And then I have it labeled oil. So the only thing that ever goes in this jar is the oil. Now I don't ever rely on my memory to be able to track how I do all the maintenance and everything with my machines. So what I do is I keep a sheet for each mower that I have, and I just write at the top of it which one it is, the engine that it has, what oil filter number it takes, how much oil it takes, how much weight, what weight oil, and then I track all of the stuff that I've done. So if I do an oil change, I just write down on the paper, oil change with this many hours. I put 2.2 quarts of conventional oil, or just whatever kind of oil you're using. And that way I can track and I know exactly when every service was done. I don't do it for like blade changes or stuff like that, but if I have to, basically just oil changes, the hydro oil changes, all of that kind of stuff. That way I can look at the sheet and know exactly when the last service was done and that everything's just tracked. And then if I ever go to sell the mower, I now have a maintenance record that I can include with it for whoever buys it. That way they know exactly what maintenance was done, the oil filter that it needs, when everything was completed. So hopefully that helps you. This process, the concept is the same for all mowers and basically vehicles too. Get the old oil out, put new oil in, swap out the filter. As long as you're changing the oil, that machine should last you a good long time. A lot of people will say, oh, don't get this brand, it'll blow up on you. Well, if you abuse that stuff and you don't maintain it, it's gonna break. So as long as you maintain your equipment, you'll be good to go. And these mowers and this equipment is way too expensive to just neglect it. So take care of your equipment. I'm gonna get back to work. Y'all be good.